Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends old and new and have honest conversations. Today, I welcome Vinnie Kishbaugh to the front porch, a dear friend and a colleague. Welcome to the front porch, Vinnie.
How are you, Doug? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well, and I'm just glad you could make the virtual trip up here on the front porch. I always like to start my episodes with a little bit of an intro in regards to, your background. So would you mind telling the audience where you grew up and maybe a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up not far from where we currently live now in Lock Haven, just 70 miles east of that in a small town called Berwick, PA. We were really put on the map in the early 90s because of our football program, and we had a legendary coach there, George Curry. They even did a Dateline news episode on us back my sophomore year of high school. At that point, we had one of the highest rating recruits come out of the area, Ron Paulus, who ended up going to Notre Dame and is still their athletic director there today. But grew up in a typical household for, 80s for most of my childhood up until about 10th, 11th grade, 10 or 11 years old. And then the plant that my father had worked at, Argo Fabrication, had decided to pack up from town, and they kind of set the stage for that area. They had left, and then there was a big cigar factory in town that employed a bunch of people, and they left. So Berwick ended up becoming, really like a lot of other areas, blighted, when industry left. And really the community really is a tight-knit group of people. They really support high school athletics. They really rally around those things. And it gave us an opportunity. Most of us came from working class families, myself being first generation going to college. But it gave a lot of us an opportunity to go on to bigger and better things, to say.
You came from a bigger family, right? How many siblings do you have?
Yeah, so I have 5. There's 5 of us all together, 4 brothers and 1 sister. I have a twin brother, and then I had an older brother, Tony. He passed away. It's been 26 years now that he's been gone. I have a younger sister and then a little brother, Buddy.
And you talked about football. Was that a sport that you started playing really early on as a little kid, or how did that work out that you got into that sport over other sports?
Well, you've seen the size of me, Doug. My size did not lend well to tennis. So football it was. But no, Pop Warner was big in our town. It's a town of 12 that was at that time 12,000 people, and there were 8 different midget football teams in the town, and all of the teams, there was an A team and a B team, and we ended every football season with a Super Bowl of the midget football. But yeah, football was very big in our area. I mean, from the time you were little, Berwick was a very unique place. They started broadcasting the football games. We were in the national USA Today publication several times throughout the 80s and 90s as being ranked in top 10 or the number 1 team in the country multiple times. My sophomore year, that we were number 1 in the nation We had won a state championship. And because of that ranking, we got to meet President Clinton on the West Lawn. I got to shake his hand. We took a tour of the Capitol. We got to see probably the biggest thing as a high school kid really into football was we went to the Washington Redskins training facilities, and one of their players at the time, Brian Mitchell, he was always great returner for them. He was in their weight room working out, and I think seeing that kind of, lit the fire under a lot of us for a number of years. I think our head coach, George Curry, I think he won the state championship in the 90s, something like 7 out of the 10 times that it was played. So he had a very good run. Like I said, it really put our town back on the map to get some recognition.
Yeah, it's crazy. The first time you told me that through high school football, you got to meet the president of the United States. I just thought that was really crazy, but really neat too. What a cool experience for a bunch of kids from working town Pennsylvania to have those kinds of opportunities. But you've also often told me about how young you were when you started actually working too, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Walk us through that. How old were you when you first started working, and what kind of jobs were you doing?
I started working at 14. That was my first paid job, but I had an older brother he was 9 years older, Tony. So, he was working at local restaurants, pizza shops, mom and pop shops, through high school, and he would bring us with him. And that's, 9, 10 years old, we were going to work with him, and he would pay us a nickel for every pizza box that we would make throughout the day. So his boss would love us. We would go through like 3-4 cases of pizza boxes, sitting there just making them all up, and he was paying us a nickel a piece. So we ended up making, the total day $5. We thought we were rich, but right next door there was an arcade, so I could always go and blow that within 15 minutes. But then at 14, I started working. I was working at a diner. It was called the Zephyr Diner. It actually is I believe in Canton, Ohio right now. I think it's called the Starlight Diner at this point. But it was one of those classic, the silver stainless steel fronts. So I was in there doing prep, washing dishes. They would, mostly everybody that worked there were grandmothers, old grandmother types. And they really took to having this chubby little 14-year-old, working in the kitchen with them, washing dishes. I'd peel potatoes for them, really anything that they wanted. And I worked all through high school, different odds and end jobs, always in the restaurant industry. And then I was lucky my junior year of high school, I started working with the Muley family. They owned Franco's Pizzeria in Nescopec. It's now Fratello's. I started working there, and, I was just washing dishes, and the owner's mother, she saw that I had good work ethic. And one of the things, I said to her one day, I said, I'd really like to learn to cook. And she said, well, if you're interested, on your days off, if you want to come in, I'll show you what you need to know. So again, on my days off, I would spend an entire workday at this woman's hip, working for free, doing whatever she wanted me to do. But a lot of my foundation, came from her.
But I need to rewind a little bit. The average 14 or 15-year-old kid isn't necessarily going to have the stick-to-itiveness that you must have had at 14 or 15. Washing dishes in a restaurant is not a fun job. What do you think it is about you, or going back to 14 or 15-year-old Vinnie? What was it about that kid that had him keep going back day after day?
Well, I said I had a typical 80s childhood up until about 10 or 11 years old. Um, when I was 12, my dad got diagnosed with renal failure. Sorry, I'm breaking up a little bit. So he had to stop working.
And you felt, was there pressure put on you to get to bring money home for the family? Or was that something you said, this is something I have to do?
No, it was more, I want to say being 14, 15, it was probably the fact that I wasn't walking around with the same shoes. So if I wanted those things, you had to work to get them.
Yeah. And you saw the value in that, because I just don't think the average kid does, especially when you think about some of the kids that you and I work with nowadays. And I don't want to stereotype an entire generation, but I think there's the situation you're talking about and puts a different perspective on the value of a dollar and what it takes to earn that money. And I'm sure those are things that have stuck with you your whole life too, I would imagine. I mean, you're talking about the foundational years of who you are, your teenage years. And I can't imagine, you can't put a price on what kind of foundation that probably built for you.
Absolutely not. And, even today I've been, this is the teaching profession. There are, even though it's very challenging, there are a lot of perks to it. And one is that you get done, relatively early in the day. You can start your day early and get done with your day. And when I first started doing that, when I first got into teaching, I really struggled with that much time on my hands. I still do.
Because that you say that because you were coming from the food industry where the hours are, ridiculously long. And
so for probably 15, right after high school, I worked 6 years. Well, I went to college for one semester, and that my parents ended up both parents were at that point pretty ill and fragile in their health, and ended up coming back home to try to help out a little bit, and worked for 6 years prior to going back to school. And in those 6 years, I think I worked roughly 6 days a week, 12, 14-hour days. That's just, the way that the industry works. And when you're at, mom and pop shops, if someone calls off, there's not always people to fill in. So you're working extra hours or doing whatever. But yeah, having, come from an industry where you're working 12, 14-hour days, 6 days a week, I really didn't have a whole lot of time for hobbies. When I started teaching, I started coaching. It was, football being a passion. I felt very fortunate to be able to get back into that sport and try to give the same type of influence that my coach had on me. And that consumed a lot of my time. But, once I stepped away from that, I really saw how much time I had on my hands.
Well, let's talk a little bit about teaching. So you spent the first couple years of your life doing food industry, and then you did a couple other odd jobs. I know at one point, didn't you work as like a prison guard or something like that?
Yeah, I worked corrections for 3 years. But even in working corrections, I always had another job. I always helped out at the restaurant, just filling in. I had a connection with the people. So restaurant work for me, it was never really, I never really felt like work. I was just going and hanging out with, you know, people that I enjoyed spending time with. And it was always great. It was always nice to build relationships with customers, and you know, some of them still reach out to me. I haven't worked at Franco's now for close to 20 years. And some of them still reach out through Facebook or whatever, you know, just to see how you're doing. You know, you build relationships with those people day in and day out. So, yeah, I never felt like work. Prison, however, prison guard definitely was work. My hat goes off to any individual that can do that day in and day out, and, you know, still keep the love of humanity in them. It's hard dealing with people day in and day out when you're only seeing the worst of mankind and what it has to offer. And for me, it really started to warp my view of the general population sometimes. So at that point, I knew it was time for me. I needed to get out of that role.
So now you've been in education for a couple of years now. I know when I first met you, you were in the role of a special ed teacher at our school, but recently you've had the opportunity to transition to our culinary arts teacher. The school where Vinnie and I teach at is unique that we have our own VOTEC programs in the same building that our regular high school, quote unquote, is. And you are now the head of our culinary arts program. Tell the listeners a little bit, like, how does that program work? I'm a freshman. I come in and I want to be part of this program. What does that look like for me as a freshman, as opposed to when I'm done as a senior?
So for freshmen, I think what our district has started with, allowing freshmen to take an intro into vocation, is absolutely great. It really opens kids' eyes. You know, my class starts with 30 and usually ends with 17. You know, it's often like the first day of college when you walk into that meeting and they tell you to look to your right and look to your left. Some of these people won't be here, you know, in the next 4 years. But the first year when they come in, they're with me for, 90 minutes. And we really concentrate on safety and sanitation in the kitchen. Most people, they don't think about the small things when it comes to cooking. They've seen Graham or grandma do things, so that's what they know. The moms of my first year students always love to comment that their children came home and after 15 years, they taught them how to crack an egg. Safety and sanitation is big in the first year. And obviously that gets reviewed every year. And then from there, we just break every aspect of culinary down. So, we start, if you're looking at baking, our kids, they start off with learning lean doughs. So they learn about pizza doughs and French breads. And the reason we start them there is because our freshmen, we run that cat cart through the business club where we're taking a mobile food cart around. They're taking a mobile food cart around, but we provide the food for that, 3 days a week. So some of the things that we provide are sandwiches, are strombolis, soft pretzels, pizzas. So they have to know how to produce these things. And if you look at the restaurants in our area, you can probably count more pizza shops than you can churches. So knowing that skill is a doorway to a job. And I try to impress upon the students, learning these skills, you will never go a day without work. And that's from my own personal experience. At the time I was living in Bloomsburg. I went to a friend's wedding in March And by May, I had moved from Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania to Greenville, South Carolina. And I had gotten a job, started work at 5 a.m. the Friday that I pulled in at a Cracker Barrel. And I worked that, wasn't what I wanted to do, but I worked it for 2 weeks and saw that there was a sign at a Greek restaurant. It was a Greek restaurant managed by two Middle Eastern gentlemen. They served Greek food and pizza. And, you know, the first time I went in, I told him, I said, you know, are you looking, you're looking for help? What can I do for you? And he said, well, what do you know how to do? And I said, well, really anything you want. And he said, okay, go make a pizza. So I went back, I made a pizza. And he said, well, all right, can you grill up some chicken for the souvlaki that they had? So I grilled up chicken for him. And he was like, all right, do you have any references? So I gave him the reference for the guy, Franco, who owned Franco's. The next day, the guy called me back, and within 2 weeks, I was managing his restaurant for him. So, you know, if you put the time and effort into a vocation, you know, like anything, work finds you. And I try, you know, the kids, they do a great job. You know, you had said about you didn't want to stereotype an entire generation. Being in a vocation, you definitely see kids who have not been challenged, you know, have been sheltered. They ask every question that you could possibly think of about everything. They, you know, they are not used to being directed to do things. And unfortunately, some of those kids don't keep pace, but it is amazing when you see kids come out of their shell and just put their nose down and jump right into something. I have a group of freshmen this year that, like I said, I started off with about 27, 30 students, and I'm down to about 17. And every single one of those students I would hire to come and work for me in a minute. So, you know, being able to work in the industry, I've seen right now with the restaurant that we're opening, we've hired a bunch of high school kids that are filling in positions, and those kids, they've jumped right in. You know, they're on time, they're working hard. So, you know, I really think that sometimes we look at things through nostalgic glasses. You know, everything was always better when we were younger. But I really think the kids today, they are working. They have great work ethic too. You know, my daughter is another example of that. She's been working since she turned 16, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And, you know, she started in the healthcare industry, and it's very challenging. Some of the stories that she comes home and tells us about, you know, I couldn't imagine being an 18-year-old and having to do, you know, what she does day in and day out. So I think, you know, there are a ton of hardworking kids, and I'm glad that I get to work with them in this industry.
All right, a philosophical question for you in regards to what you do. What does learning how to cook, or cooking as a whole, what can that teach someone besides the ability to feed themselves?
Time management. I mean, you know, even I talk about it with my students all the time. Like if we're doing a catering event, or even in getting food out, you know, if one of them are absent, every day is built around time. So, you know, if we have 4 people that are scheduled to work in that 8 hours, 8 times 4, You got 32, that's 32 hours of work in that 8 hours that needs to be completed. If somebody calls off or somebody doesn't show up that day, you don't get 8 hours back. You know, that's falling on somebody else. So I think somebody that grows up working in this industry, time management, dependability, you're definitely, if you're going to be successful in this, you're going to have some staying power. And I think the other thing that you learn as you get older is you have to trust other people to do work with you. You know, when I was first in the, restaurant, if I was going into a new position, I really tried to do everything because my name was, my name's attached to it. I don't want somebody screwing something up and now I'm getting blamed for it. So I'm just going to do it, Well, that gets old and you end up wearing yourself out. So you have to learn to trust people working in the industry too. The other thing is, this industry is so diverse. You could be working. When I was in South Carolina at the Greek restaurant, the majority of my kitchen staff were Latino Americans or Mexican Americans, and spoke very little English, but you find a way to communicate. You find a way to, converse with one another. I remember working through college at a local OIP, and they had hired a fella from Guatemala. He spoke very little English, but I remember his first day there, sitting out on break, after work, each of us working 6 hours with our head down, we found a way in that 30 minutes to have some type of conversation before we had to go back. But I really think that everybody should have to work in the food industry at one point in their life. And fast food, I would love everybody to work in fast food. Everyone that says, people don't deserve $12 and $15 an hour to flip a burger, I want those people to go and work 40 hours doing that job and then have them tell me what they think they should get paid.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% about everybody should spend a little bit of time in the food industry. My very first job, actual paid job, was as a busboy at a mom and pop family restaurant not too far from where I grew up. And it sure opened my eyes in a lot of aspects about, a lot of different things, having to work, teamwork really taught me a lot about that, because I was on a team with the waitresses, but I was also on a team with the people in the back of the house, in the kitchen as well. And the dishwashers. And I mean, everybody, it's a giant team that has to keep a restaurant going. I agree with you. I think it is eye-opening. If your only experience is ever just going to a restaurant, sitting down and having food and then leaving, you really don't understand how that machine works, and makes sure that you are being, getting the food that you want from the menu in a timely fashion, and everything that goes along with having a good dining experience, for sure. But I want to ask you this question. What do you say? So you've spent your whole life almost in the kitchen. What do you say to people that come up to you and they say right away, I can't cook. I'm afraid to cook. I just can't do it. What do you say to those people?
If it was hard, I wouldn't be doing it. Anyone that can read can cook. If you can listen, you can cook. With audiobooks, I mean, you can have recipes read to you. It's just following instructions. And the most important thing is don't be concerned if it turns out well the first time. I always hear from, whether I'm training someone or I'm teaching, I'm in school and I'm teaching, they always say, you made that look so easy. And when you've done something 10,000 times, it is. You know, there were, when I was the executive chef at the Days Inn, you know, we would hold events where we would have 1,200 people come in on a Friday, and they wouldn't leave until Sunday morning. And we provided damn near 24-hour service to them. They would show up at 10 o'clock Friday evening. We would have a buffet set up for them. They would have the buffet. And then at 2 o'clock, they would have a bagged like breakfast sandwich to take to the room with them. So that was ready. And then you would clean the kitchen up, go to a hotel room, sleep until, you know, 4:30, 5 o'clock. And then you were back into the kitchen ready to serve them breakfast for 7. Once breakfast was done at 7, you were getting ready to prepare a bag lunch for them to take with them on a trip to either the Poconos, or they were going to Tussey Mountain, somewhere skiing. And then they would come back Saturday, and we would do the same thing all over again, you know, for Sunday. So it's just, you can't imagine what that feels like on your body, but it's also a rush. Like when you're down to 15 minutes and this stuff has got to get there, it's a rush.
But what do you say? No, I understand that for sure. But what do you say to that home cook? Let's use my wife as an example. I do the cooking in our house because it's something that I thoroughly enjoy to do. My wife does not enjoy cooking. At some aspects of it, she's afraid to fry things. She's afraid to deep fry things. When you have somebody like that, let's say a student comes into your classroom, or, you know, a friend of yours that's saying, Vinny, I want to be a better cook, but I'm just afraid to do some of this stuff. What do you say to those people?
You have to do it. I mean, they're the only, and I know it sounds, but that's the only way you get good at something is by doing it. You know, a friend of mine said, you can play guitar every day for 7 years, for 7 hours, or you can play the guitar for 7 years for 1 hour a month. The choice is yours. You're still playing the guitar, but what you're going to be at the end of those 7 years playing every day, or what you're going to be at the end of those 7 years playing one time a month, are drastically different. The same thing is in the kitchen. If you are in the kitchen cooking every day, the type of cook that you are is going to be different than if you just do it every once in a while. There is no substitution for doing. You can read all the books in the world, but unless you are doing one of the greatest books, Salt, Fat, Acidity, and Time, I believe is the title of it. And the woman talks about these, when I was listening to the book, how simple of concepts that she was talking about. And I was like, well, who the hell doesn't know to put salt in your food? You know, but there are people, when they think about salt, we've been told, oh, you don't want to add so much salt. Well, no, if you are eating boxed food and processed food your entire diet, you probably don't want to add a whole ton of salt to your mashed potatoes or your steak. But if everything you're cooking is fresh and whole, you have to add salt to it. So you just have to do, and everybody makes mistakes. I've been doing this for 30 years. I throw things in the garbage at the end of trying something, still it didn't turn out. It goes in the garbage. What's $8? I'll go to a grocery store and grab another piece of chicken, whatever. But you can't get better at something by wishing it to happen. You have to do, and if the kids who come into my class, and I have kids. One of my students last year, she was a special needs student. She was a life skills student. And one of my greatest joys was she was terrified of the oven, like would not go anywhere near it. And by the end of the year, she was putting things in and taking them out. There were times that she needed assistance, but by the end of the year, she felt confident enough to go to the oven, open it up, put something in, or take something out. You know, you just have to keep doing. Anybody who has any type of fear of anything, you're never going to get over it by trying to wish it away.
Yeah. Well, let's transition to something you already hinted at that kind of fits in really well with what we're talking about right now. You are about to open your own restaurant. You and your wife are about to open your own restaurant. Tell the audience a little bit about the restaurant's name, where it is, what you envision for this restaurant, and then I have some follow-up questions for you.
Yeah. So the name of the restaurant is Good Neighbor Craft House. We're located at 9650 Renova Road, Heiner, PA, right at the foot of the Heiner Mountain. Our place is directly across the river from the overlook. Beautiful, beautiful scenery. But, you know, really started in the pandemic, right before the pandemic, I started a catering business, and I was doing catering and some consultation locally for some restaurant owners, and one of them had reached out and during the pandemic and asked if I could help them, and started off with, it was only going to be one weekend here and there, and it ended up being every weekend for about a year and a half, where we were in there Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, plus, you know, we were doing our catering events and everything else. And in doing that, we really, you know, I got back that, you know, I told you that when you're in the rush, you know, you're in the weeds, it's a rush to be in there and doing that. I kind of missed it. So once we were in there for, you know, a couple months, Kate and I, we really started talking about, you know, the opportunity of doing it for ourselves. You know, we saw the amount of hours that we were putting in and how it was being managed with both of our jobs. And we really felt like we could do this for ourselves. But we picked the name Good Neighbor Craft House because we really, in today's climate, feel that we need to get back to very similar to, you know, to your podcast, The Front Porch. You know, we want to have a place where people can come and gather, have conversation, enjoy one another's company, bring your family, but really take time to enjoy one another, enjoy, you know, the scenery that we have to offer. We plan on being a brewery, so that will be taking place. And until then, we'll be featuring craft beers from some local PA brewers.
One of the aspects of your mission statement or your philosophy for this new restaurant is that you want to have everything as local as possible. So you mentioned already, you know, highlighting and focusing on Pennsylvania made beers, for example, but also, I mean, you've told me already that you're going to try as much as possible for the food side to source locally from local beef farmers, from local produce farmers. Why did you decide that is something that you feel was important enough to incorporate at your new restaurant?
You know, one of, I think is really the love of animals. If it, you know, the love of the area, the love of animals. You know, I got a chance, a local farm had reached out to me, Polecat Hollow Farm. They're out of Howard. They had reached out to me when I had first started the catering, and, you know, asked if I had any interest. And I went out and toured their farm and saw the way that they were treating their animals, the way that they raised their animals. And it just, it gave me a whole new outlook on the food that you prepare for people. You can take something from the grocery store and you can make it taste good, but you don't necessarily know that it is good. There are all kinds of food laws that are passed every year that consumers really don't have any idea about. Chickens being butchered in the United States, then sent to China, then to be cleaned, and then sent back to the United States after being washed. I mean, you're talking about a 3-month turnaround on some of those things. So what are they injecting, those meats with to keep them? If anybody has ever watched Food Incorporated, that documentary on Netflix, that's enough to make you not want to eat, any meat that's commercially raised. And then, the other part is just the quality. I use Key Farm premium beef. They're out of Mifflinburg. And I was lucky enough to do an event for former executive of the Garces Group, which is Iron Chef Jose Garces. I got to do a meal for him over the summer, and I used Key Farm's tenderloin. And literally all I did to it was salt and pepper. And he said that was the best tenderloin he had ever eaten. And the guy had worked for Chef Garces for, 7 years. So, and I've eaten Chef Garces's food and it's unbelievable. So, it wasn't anything that I did. It was definitely the quality of the meat that I was able to serve. So, all with being a good neighbor, we can't hang that name and say that we're going to be good neighbors and not try to help build up our neighbor, build up their businesses, but also build up, the bodies of our neighbors by providing them with, the proper nourishment of good food. So that was really what when we went about going local farm to table, that was really the thought behind it, was just the care that they give to the animals, and the quality of the product. The biggest struggle with that, though, is, educating the consumer. You can't always have Delmonico's. You can't always have T-bone steaks. There's only so many of those cuts in an animal. So, it's just educating people on different cuts then, and trying to introduce different cuts into a market that people aren't used to.
Right. But it also comes with the reward of, I just think of like pork, for example. The average pork that you're getting in the grocery store is pretty bland. And the first time you taste pork coming from heritage breeds of pigs, it's like pork you've never tasted before. And I think, like you said, if you can, it's an opportunity to teach the average diner, this is what beef that is only grass fed tastes like, or this is what Berkshire pork tastes like, as opposed to the pork you might be buying at the grocery store. So I think I 100% am behind you and the philosophy. I love the idea that so many people are now embracing and going back to our original roots of farm to table, using the entire animal and the value of that. I mean, it's how Americans ate for the majority of our history. It's only within the last let's say 75, 80 years that we've kind of strayed from that. So I'm glad to see not just your endeavor, but a lot of other restaurants around the area that are also embracing this, what you might consider an old philosophy, but it is truly one that is keeping, keeping everybody in business too, and in helping being that good neighbor and reaching out to the farmer down the street to get his eggs and helps him out. And you're also getting, exactly where those eggs are coming from. You know exactly what those chickens look like. Maybe you drive by them every day on your way to work or something. I can't. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I know you are too, and I'm really glad that you decided to go that route with your new restaurant.
Yeah, we obviously want to try to stay as local as possible whenever possible. It's going to be challenging to just. This is the first restaurant that we've opened, and where we're opening it in the middle of the PA wilds. It's not like you're in the middle of a downtown. So it'll be interesting to see how the area responds to that type of menu.
I got one more question along these lines for you. What you're about to do is a huge gamble and a huge risk. Where do you think your risk-taking attitude comes from? Because not every person would be willing to take a jump like you are, and your wife as well. Where do you think that comes from?
I think because for the majority of my life, I haven't had much. That's my position in life is what started me working early. And it's hard to, you can make a good living for yourself doing what we do. But I don't feel that we don't feel that we can completely fulfill what we're put here to do just by working 9 to 5 for somebody else. And my wife and I, we've had this conversation. She's like, "Are we doing the right thing?" And I said, if we're not, we'll sell the house and live in a trailer. Material things are exactly what they are. They're things. I would rather take a chance and fail and look back on my life and say, I'm glad that I did that. It wasn't successful, but I'm glad that I did it. Or look back and say, I'm so happy that we took that chance because we were able to do X, Y, and Z now because of it. I would rather be on that end than 5 years from now, 10 years, 20, whatever God gives us, for me to look back and say that than to look back with any type of regret.
I hear you. Well, I wish you only the best, of course, in your endeavors. And I'll put a link to your restaurant's Facebook page in the show notes when I publish the episode. So anyone that's interested can learn more and hopefully go visit and get a delicious meal from Vinnie. But as you know, because I know you listen to the podcast, we close every conversation with 10 quick questions. Are you ready, young man?
I am.
All right, here we go. What is your morning drink of choice?
Coffee.
How do you take it?
With cream.
I ask you this question, since you were so young and started working, how old were you when you first started drinking coffee?
Well, that's from as long as I can remember, Doug. I really don't ever remember. Like my mom had a pot of coffee on all day, like literally from the time she woke up until the time she went to bed, there was coffee on. And the coffee that she didn't drink went into a Tupperware pitcher with ice, and she had iced coffee. So we always had coffee.
That's I had my grandparents where my brother and I spent a lot of our time as little kids. It's the exact same thing. My grandfather always had a pot of coffee on. I couldn't tell you how old I was when I had my first cup either. I mean, I was a kid but I don't have a recollection of not having coffee. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
crazy. All right. Number two. This is, I'll be curious to see what you give for your answer. Who is a go-to musical artist or group for you?
Right now, so I switch all the time. Like I get into phases. Right now, it's Nathaniel Rateliff
Hmm.
for me. His music, I don't know what it is. A lot of it reminds me of some older stuff. I think because it reminds me of some older stuff that my mom and I would listen to. Um, so I just his stuff. Anytime I hear that, my foot is tapping, and I'm tapping the steering wheel, belting it out as loud as I can.
He is. It's good. I agree. I agree. Number three. What movie can you watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Oh, I have. So Blues Brothers is a movie that I love. Animal House is another one I love. Big Lebowski is another one. Boondock Saints is another one. But those would be the top four.
Well, those are four. I'm sitting here nodding. Everybody can't see me doing that. But yeah, those are four great films for sure. What's the last thing that you read?
I read, does audiobook count?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. No, absolutely.
So the last thing that I read was the Matthew McConaughey memoir, Green Lights.
I didn't even know he wrote a memoir.
Yeah, my wife listened to it first, and she was like, "You should really listen to that. You would like it." And I was like, "I can't stand Matthew McConaughey or his voice." And she was like, "I'm telling you, you'll like it." And God damn it, she was right.
All right, I might have to check that out myself then. How about okay. Number five. I'm really curious. You've been around pizza your whole life. So what's your favorite topping?
Oh, that is like saying, "What's your favorite beer? What's your favorite?
Who's your favorite child? That type of
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
who's your favorite child?" Yeah, this is sad to say. We've eaten pizza. I've made pizza 3 times this week. And I've made something a different topping, but so our restaurant makes this Dilly pizza, which is ranch dressing, mozzarella cheese, and dill pickles. It sounds like a gross combination, but it's delicious. That's one of my favorites. And then you can't go wrong with just a thin crust, extra crispy pepperoni and hot peppers.
I've had the dill pickle pizza and it is worth every mile you have to drive to taste it. Trust me, people. Trust me on this. All right. Number six, laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Can I go for a hike on the beach?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm not a beach person. Like I'm not going to lay out in the sun. I mean, people will think bacon is cooking within 5 minutes of me out there. I got my mom's Italian temper and my dad's Pennsylvania Dutch pale skin, so it was an even trade, I guess. But I burn in seconds, so I'm not a real beach goer, but I do like going to the shore because my wife loves it. I usually like to go for a walk on the beach in the morning. And then while she's laying out, I try to find as many bars as I can that are close. But we are pretty avid hikers. We have lived next to Castania Water Reserve, and they do Boulder Beast out through there. And we hike that 2-3 times a week. Just because we can let our dogs run. So anything really to be outside, as long as it's not super hot, I don't, and it's not super sunny.
There, there we go. All right, this is a great question because we eat together often. And but here's the question: as I ask everybody, you have invited me over for dinner. What are you making?
Well, it's always I always struggle with this because I always ask people, well, what do you want? And they always say, well, make whatever you want. You know, you don't go overboard. But it's really whatever the person, usually whoever's coming to my house, I know what they like to eat. So I try to make whatever that is. So for you, Douglas, we would have some stuffed pig stomach, maybe some scrapple.
Yeah, sounds good.
Some liverwurst.
Sounds delicious. Sounds delicious. All right, number 8. What is a dream vacation destination of yours?
Italy.
Italy.
I would love to go, and I want to see the whole boot, and even the little rock they kicked, Sicily. I want to go over there, go see that. I mean, I love the culture. I love the food. I grew up listening to my grandparents speak it. I love, why my mother never learned it, I don't know, but I just love everything about it.
Well, I hope someday you get to make that dream come true for sure.
Me too.
All right, number 9. What is something that you're afraid of?
Oh, bats and mice.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that works. And last question. What job, other than one that you've had, would you love to have?
I would be a rock star, Doug. If I could be a rock star, that would be the job that I would want. There would need to be a lot of talent to be acquired, but I think that would be awesome, just to be able to. And I'm not saying small time. I want to be big time. I want to be able to hop on a plane, go to another city, do the city, fly somewhere else, just be jet setting all over the place. I think that would be the life.
Okay. You're the first person to give that as an answer. That's great. That's great. I could see you doing it. I could see you doing it. Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to get working on that.
Maybe if Nathaniel Rateliff listens to your show, maybe he will invite me to come tour with him.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe he could have you as his personal chef. How would that be?
That would be awesome. If you're listening, I will do it.
Sounds good. Vinny, it is always a pleasure talking with you. The last couple of years, our friendship has grown a lot because of some of the things that we do together. And it just, you mean a lot to me. Our friendship means a lot to me. And I'm so glad that you agreed to come up here on the front porch and share a little conversation with me and the listeners to the podcast.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. I've been waiting for my invitation.
I get told that sometimes. Well, your invitation came. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
All right, Vinny. All right, I'll link the restaurant. Like I said, everybody, you can check out the show notes down below to check out Good Neighbor Craft House. So you can check them out both online and then hopefully in person in the very near future. Vinny, once again, thanks so much, and we'll talk soon.
All right, good talking to you, Doug. See you later.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5 stars only, please. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all of your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.